morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for How Hackers Hack. All attendees will be in listen only mode. And if you have any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat or the questions section. My name is Brian Philippone, and I'm the Director of Client Services here at Long Island Server Solutions, and I will be your host this morning. Joining us today are industry experts from Long Island Server Solutions and Scout. Justin, would you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Good morning. I'm Justin Gershowitz. I've been with Long Island Server Solutions for over 15 years. I'm a senior account manager and network engineer. You know, those positions that sound great, but most people don't know what it means. I work with our clients as a virtual CTO to make sure we're working together on the same path so we maximize their functionality while protecting their data and adapting to new and emerging threats. I'll pass this along to Stephen from Scout.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for attending today's webinar. My name is Steve Arcolio with Scout Cyber Solutions. I'm the channel account manager here at Scout, and my responsibility is to work with organizations like Long Island Server Solution, provide them with enterprise-grade cybersecurity products to help protect their small and medium-sized businesses. I've been with Scout for 5 years, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation. With me on the call is Kevin Williams, one of our sales engineers. Say hello, Kev.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, everyone. Kevin Williams here. Very excited today to kind of go over some of the demonstrations we have in store for you, just to really show how quickly and easily hacking can happen just to anybody, right? Without the right tools in place, these are the types of attacks that we really see day in, day out. So really, it's pumped to really show you just how quickly it can happen. Back over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Kevin. So just a little bit about us here at Long Island Server. We are a managed services provider, so that means we're an outsourced IT department. We have a multitude of services that we offer to a small and medium-sized business. We are all W-2 employees, and we are first to market with the New York Shield Compliance Pathway Management. Stephen, want to direct a little something to you. Could you tell us a little bit about Scout?
Be happy to. So Scout is actually a nationally recognized cybersecurity product, and we direct our efforts to work with small and medium-sized businesses through MSPs like Long Island Server. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some of the industry trade journals that track cybersecurity, and we're very proud because not only has Scout been recognized as a quality producer of cybersecurity solutions, but also our employees have also been recognized for the work they do in helping protect small and medium-sized businesses. One of the ways we do it is through our 24/7/365 Security Operations Center. That provides Long Island Server with one dashboard to see all the cyber events that could be potentially happening on their customers' network. We also provide Long Island Server with one number to call. So if there's any question about what's going on regarding a customer's network around cybersecurity, or if they just want to call and ask for some information on best practices around cybersecurity, all they need to do is pick up the phone, call our Security Operations Center based in Long Island, in fact, and speak to a cybersecurity expert. We're talking about individuals with fingers on keyboard experience who are comfortable and familiar with working on very sophisticated cyber security attacks. So we truly are a resource for Long Island Server around cybersecurity. And we also provide a turnkey partnership. We have a very comprehensive product suite. So we can deliver through Long Island Server everything from log security monitoring, network security monitoring, to Office 0365 security monitoring, email protection, and endpoint protection. So back to you, Brian.
Thanks so much, Stephen. We're happy to be a partner with you guys. To start us off, Stephen, could you give us a little bit of a description as to what you're seeing in the cyber landscape? I know you've been with Scout some time, but what have you been seeing?
So it's interesting, Brian, and everyone on today's call. I've been with Scout for 5 years, as I said earlier, and it's interesting. As you would expect, I've seen a lot of things change. But one of the things that hasn't changed in the 5 years I've been with Scout is the tremendous shortage of cybersecurity talent. Again, as I said earlier, we're talking about people with fingers on keyboard experience who've worked on very sophisticated cybersecurity attacks. And how that impacts small and medium-sized businesses is they simply don't have access to that talent. So if you look at different organizations that track cybersecurity, Gartner being one as an example, they'll tell you to a man that the only way that a small or medium-sized business can access that talent is through working with organizations like Long Island Server. Just to put a finer point on it for you guys, in just 2021, so by the end of this year, there'll be 600,000 cybersecurity jobs that go unfilled. So the problem is acute. And again, it impacts mostly small and medium-sized businesses. Under the heading of what I've seen change in 5 years, been a lot there, but probably the two most important things I've changed is really two areas. One, how the attackers go after customers now and who the attackers go after. So one example is when I first started, hackers would go after large enterprise accounts, Fortune 1000 companies, go in quickly, steal as much information as they could, and then get out as quickly as they could. The other thing that has changed is now they no longer target those large enterprise customers. They target small and medium-sized businesses. Hackers are smart. They realize that those customers or that group of customers are typically unprotected. So not only have they changed who they go after, but their methodology has changed. So for example, instead of going in quickly, getting out quickly, now they go in and once they breach a client's network, they actually sit on the network on average 196 days. That's not Scout's statistics or Long Island Server statistics. That's actually right from the Verizon breach report for 2019. So think about it. A hacker could be sitting on your network for on average 196 days before they ever launch an attack. So who the hackers go after and how they attack has changed dramatically in the 5 years I've been with Scout.
That's amazing, Stephen. 196 days is a long time to do anything. So it sounds like they'd really be able to get an idea of how the business works, who they talk to, the type of behaviors, and they could really capitalize on that. So going back to one of the things you had mentioned earlier, what type of attacks are you seeing? And are there any industries that are getting impacted more?
Okay, so the type of attacks we're seeing over the last 18 months are ransomware attacks, which I'm sure all of the attendees on today's webinar are familiar with. Either they know someone who suffered a ransomware attack, maybe somebody in their industry, or maybe their own company themselves have fallen victim to a ransomware attack. Quickly gaining in popularity by hackers is now a business email compromise attack. And that's related to that statistic I mentioned earlier, where a hacker's been on your network for a long time. The modus operandi there is pretty simple. They're on your network. They watch how data flows across your network. They know who's responsible for executing or requesting a wire transfer to be executed. And once they feel confident in that information, how these emails are written, who's responsible for writing them, which banks are typically requested, the amounts of a typical wire transfer, all that information is scooped up by a hacker. They know pretty much how to do it as well as your own employee does it. And then they'll launch a business email compromise in the form of a wire transfer fraud. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the type of attacks. In terms of the industries, again, not my statistics or Long Island Server statistics. Anyone who tracks the industry, they pretty much come up with the same numbers. Anywhere between 46 and 50% of the cybersecurity attacks that happen today are focused on small and medium-sized businesses. That's where we're at.
That's a pretty big number considering how many small businesses are out there. So Justin, I know you're out in the field, especially for us, and you see a lot. So what kind of things are you seeing or do you see recently?
Well, an increasingly common exploit that we're encountering is actually directly related to that wire fraud example you were discussing, Stephen. The owner of one of our companies, he travels a lot, and for whatever reason, and despite our best protests, he insists on using his personal AOL email. So, he used this for business. He used this when communicating with his employees, even with his bookkeeper about doing wire transfers. And I'm sure at this point you can see where this is going. His account was hacked. The hacker laid in wait, gathered information about the users, their terminology, typical transfer amounts. And when the time came, they used his own email address to request wire transfers to a number of bank accounts in Ukraine and Russia, totaling over 300 grand. By the time they realized what happened, money's gone. So they questioned us, and we had to explain to them that the email address they were communicating was it was legit. It had just been compromised. So the best we could offer was to recommend training with a company like Scout, so their employees would know to look out for these types of scams, and strongly urge them to use their own form of two-factor authentication. Like pick up the phone. When these emails come in, and that'll work until deepfakes start becoming more prevalent, but that's something for another webinar. But anyway, there's a lot of lessons here, but at the end of the day, education, it's really our best defense to protect against these kinds of attacks.
Sounds like a very tricky situation. I mean, it sounds like the business owner really just wanted to make sure they could continue to do business, but didn't necessarily think about the best way to do it. So, Larry, thank you for your question. Let's throw it to Stephen. Are the attacks on small businesses happening more because they are less likely to have protections in place?
100%. That's the reason. Lack of access to cybersecurity talent. Again, when you look at the industry experts, they all say that the only way small business gets access to this type of talent is to work through Long Island Server, who in turn works with Scout, who has that talent available. And the bottom line is, for a small or medium-sized business, most of them are unprotected, and the hackers know that. So these guys are, guys and gals are smart. They know where the low-hanging fruit is, and they take advantage of it.
Thank you, Stephen. Larry, thank you for the question. So, Justin, going back to you, I know recently you've been working really hard to get companies remote and getting used to that remote space, but that incurs some risks. So, could you explain what the risks would be and what's associated with that in working remotely?
Sure. Well, the pandemic has obviously pushed the world down the road of remote access and cloud computing. We were already moving in that direction before the world ended, but I'd estimate it probably accelerated the process by at least 3 years. So Microsoft has really used this opportunity to push Office 365 in their Azure platform. They made it very easy for a small business to quickly get ramped up and use the cloud. They also have rolled out a great set of tools to help make it secure. Problem is, most people, they set up the access and they don't follow through on the security part. So like everyone else, we needed to make sure our clients could take full advantage of this remote access, but we wanted to make sure they stayed protected. So once they're in Office 365 Azure, there's a lot more exposure to risk. So simple things, we make sure multi-factor is enabled, lock down access and protect and secure their data. The last thing we need is for one of their employees to, leave OneDrive open with all their company data on a hotel lobby computer, or accidentally expose all their internal documents when they try to share something with a customer. Our clients' data is our #1 priority, and with a greater exposure, it's even more of a focus for us than ever to make sure it's backed up, secured, and accounted for at all times.
Yeah, that's huge, Justin. You're absolutely right. Data is absolutely critical, and without it, we know that businesses can't really survive. So, Kevin, as the team leader in the Security Operations Center, I'm sure you see tons of threats. What have you been seeing recently?
So the biggest thing that we're seeing trend wise, ransomware attacks for sure. As we've been discussing, wire transfers, wire fraud, increase in that, and business email compromise for sure. The biggest thing to keep in mind is the fact that people are off guard at this point. We've already had the transition of, hey, we're now leaving the office, we're going back. You're working from home now, but everybody's working from home, right? So it's not just one person just working out of the house and everyone else is working individually like somewhere else. Like, you have the distractions, you have the noise coming through. So when you have these emails that come through from an email address or a domain that has one letter off or one number off or an extra space somewhere, it's things like this that really have people fall victim to it. So realistically, this is what we're seeing the most of as of right now. But I can only imagine what the change, with at this more of a permanent work from home type of work life balance kind of stays, because ultimately, like once we see this transition, it's really going to affect what the permanent landscape looks like moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we are frequently talking to our clients about making sure their email is protected. I mean, for those of you that are on, you know how many emails I sent you to register for this. So everybody's getting flooded with emails. So Kevin, could you show us what that looks like and how a hacker could actually get in with an email?
Yeah, absolutely. So from this perspective, you're looking at two things. One on the left-hand side is the tool that the attackers can use. Ultimately, this tool is a tool that you can find online. It's not something you have to go digging around the dark web for. And in a little bit, you too can be hacking. On the right-hand side, you've got the AOL account that the attacker is using to basically create a fake email that looks as if it's coming from a Microsoft security alert aspect, but in reality, it's not. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that we generate the link for Microsoft. Because at this point, that specific link actually brings the user to a web page that looks exactly like a Microsoft login page. And the thing here is that, illusion is everything when it comes to these types of attacks. So once we copy the link over, we pop it into where you see verify your identity. The email is basically live to send. So we're going to go ahead and send this off to our victim. Now, from the victim's perspective, they have no idea what's actually happening here, because from their eyes, they have no tools in place to actually stop them from, actually, seeing that this is a problem. So, but at first glance, you'll see that it's coming from an AOL account. It's not actually coming from Microsoft. But for the user who may be panicking, thinking, well, I need to reset my password immediately because I don't want to get in trouble by the IT department, which is totally valid. And we understand the concerns, but take a minute to really look at what you're being presented with before automatically clicking. Regardless, in this case, that's not exactly what the user is being faced with. So they go ahead and click on the link and they're brought to what looks like a Microsoft login page. So, they're thinking they're following, normal protocol. They're going ahead, putting in their username, putting in their password. And in following those actions without actually bringing the proper parties involved, that's where you've actually given away the credentials. So from this side of the coin, we're now switching back over to the attacker's perspective. Then you can see that the attacker does have those credentials. Now, if we go ahead and copy, the credentials over, we can actually log into that user, and that's where the damage really starts taking place. From this perspective, we already have the username in place, so we're going to go ahead and paste that password, and then just like that, we have access. So now the damage really comes in once we start creating that forwarding rule, because this attacker knows that the user that we gained access to has access to specific wire fraud information. So the first thing that the attacker would do is create a forwarding rule and name it something inconspicuous, like admin, for example. Once that's created, that's something that's going to ensure that the user's not going to go poking around thinking that they can go ahead and make changes. Now, the second aspect of the rule is going to focus on the subject, because now we're targeting information that's specific to wire transfers. This is really going to target the specific instructions that get sent over to this user. And the last thing that we're focusing on is making sure that anything that has to do with wire transfer is specifically forwarded over to the original AOL account that we had used to send, the fraudulent email at first. So once we have all this information in place, the name, the condition, the action, we go ahead and save that. And then from the attacker's perspective, they're really just waiting. They're waiting for the email to come through. And this goes back to what Steve was talking about when he said how, attackers are really waiting on average about 196 days. So in this case, the attacker's not waiting that long. They get the email, the victim gets the email. But if we actually switch gears and look at the attacker's perspective, you'll see that the attacker too has that email in place. So just like that, you're able to see that it only took a few minutes. But if you don't have the right tools to protect yourself, attacks like this can happen and ultimately put yourself in the organization that you're working for at risk. So again, something that working with Long Island Service Solutions, it's something preventable. It really is.
It's amazing how quickly you just did that, Kevin. And I know that, we can't drag it out for the webinar, but it realistically looks like it takes that much time. Is it really that quick that they can get into it?
I mean, it can happen faster, realistically. I mean, at this point, it really just comes down to the resources available on both sides, right? If you're, if you're trying to get into a machine that, has plenty of resource and you have a good internet connection, if the attacker knows what they're doing and the user falls victim to whatever it was that, whatever link was sent or something along those lines, it can happen that fast. Again, we slowed it down a little bit just so you can kind of see a play by play, but in some cases it doesn't go that slow. And I know it seems fast for everyone here, but it can happen a lot faster than that, and the damage can be done before you even know it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So we often talk about ransomware with our clients and to be
Yep.
watchful of that. Do you have any examples or would you be able to show us what that looks like?
Yeah, definitely. So from the ransomware side of the coin, this is really, so we'll set the kind of the scene here. We got a user that was, let's say they were gone for like a long weekend. They had their machine hacked into, they were knocked off the network, and someone introduced ransomware in plain sight. Now, from looking at the desktop, you're not thinking anything of it. Like, okay, well, here's, we've just got a desktop here. What's going on? But when the user actually goes and clicks on Chrome, that's actually when they've, enabled the ransomware. The attacker gained access to the desktop. They went ahead, removed Chrome from the desktop, and replaced it with a WannaCry variant. Ultimately, they named it Chrome.exe. So ransomware files aren't always called ransomware or WannaCry or things like that. They can just be called whatever the attacker names it. So at least from that side, the user's thinking that their computer's just slow and Chrome hasn't opened up yet. But little that they know is that they're not even on the network. Chrome hasn't opened up to even tell them that they're offline, and all their files are being encrypted. So it's from this side of it, they're thinking that everything's just taking forever, but it's not until there's a giant indicator that kind of comes into play here that lets the user know, hey, there's actually something wrong, like the wallpaper changing. Now, this really gives instruction as far as how they'd have to enable the decryptor, how they'd have to work with the information, based off of them getting their information back at all, if at all. So by hitting yes to the decryptor, this basically starts the scenario and the countdown, which everyone is used to. That you only have however many hours or however many days to actually get your data back. You've only got you have to pay via Bitcoin, and at this point, you're really looking at a scenario where you really have that sense of loss of control, just because you're not dealing with someone that is willing to just give you your information back because you made the mistake. It's something that if not addressed from the beginning and putting the tools in place to prevent attacks like this, attackers aren't necessarily waiting, to give you a pass per se. They're really looking for any chance that they can get to grab as much money as possible, especially if they're doing reconnaissance. They've been on the network for a long period of time. They know exactly how much money they can actually take from the organization. It's a whole other side of the business if you really think about it. It's not just usually one or two people working on their own.
It's just unbelievable how things are hidden in plain sight. And going to what Justin and Stephen have been saying, and Kevin as well, how much that training is critical. These little things really play a big part. If I see a desktop icon that's usually there to go to the internet, I'm going to click it. I'm not going to do anything out of the ordinary. And then all of a sudden, bam, Pandora's box just opened up. So it's really easy and very clear. Thank you for that, Kevin, on how easily and how many problems a hacker can cause in this type of environment. So, Stephen, um, what are some things that everybody on with us today could do to better protect themselves?
Sure. And so for small and medium-sized businesses, you really don't have to worry about boiling the ocean. If you follow just the first 5 steps here, you'll become much harder targets for a hacker to go after. And for those attendees on today's webinar, basically what you're trying to do is just be a harder target to hack than the next company. Because hackers aren't going to spend a lot of time trying to break into a network. They'll spend 10, 15 minutes. If they can't get in, they move on because there's so many other targets out there. So the first thing a small or medium-sized business wants to do is you want to establish what you want to protect most. What data do you care about most? What information, if it made it out into the wild, would damage your company reputation or maybe even prevent you from doing business? What information, if it were locked up with ransomware, would you have to pay a lot of money to get back, because without it, you can't continue to function as a business? So first establish what you want to protect most. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to work with Long Island Server to start building concentric rings of security around that critical information. So unfortunately, there's no one cybersecurity piece of technology that can protect a company's critical data. It has to be a layered approach. And so, if you just have endpoint and protection in place, or if you just have email protection in place, it's typically not a good strategy and a good spend, because at the end of the day, it won't give you the type of protection you're expecting or you need. So one of the things you have to do is look at number 3 very carefully. You want to know if you have a problem. And that's why monitoring your network is essential. Basically, what monitoring does is it gives Long Island Server a heads up to a potential problem before it becomes a problem. And that's directly related to number 4. With monitoring, you can actually take response time down. So that's the key to success or failure in cybersecurity. If we could spot a problem quickly, if something's propagating across your network and we could stop it, then it'll limit the damage ransomware could do. If you're getting flooded with phishing emails, and again, Long Island Server sees it, we could stop it and reset all those passwords from the senders so that they could stop bombarding you with phishing emails. And so as you're starting to realize, there's actually a plan or a potential plan you could put in place that will cover your organization. So number 5 actually speaks to that plan. We want something in place that covers the people, the processes you use, and the technology you have in place to protect not only, again, your critical data, but your brand reputation, your employee information. Both Scout and Long Island Server use a NIST framework to build out that plan. And the reason is, for most small or medium-sized businesses, they realize, hey, I know cyber's a problem. I understand it. I get it. I just don't know where to start. Where do I spend money first? What do I do first? What processes do I put in place to start the process of becoming cyber secure? And what NIST does is it actually follows a very logical progression so that Long Island Server can plan out your cybersecurity not only in logical next steps, but also in a way that it doesn't break the budget of your organization. So, we'll take everything into consideration, what you guys do for a living, the money you have to spend or money available, and then lay out a plan around the NIST framework. Make sense, Brian?
Makes tons of sense. Absolutely. That is just so big because there are so many regulatory agencies out there, and small and medium-sized businesses really haven't been regulated so often. So using that framework really puts you in the right position to make sure that you have all your boxes checked and everything allocated. So we actually have 2 questions from the audience. And before we get to them, just want to make sure everybody has our contact information. For being on with us today, you are entitled to a free security assessment. We will absolutely be more than happy to go through what you have in place and use exactly what Stephen was describing to make sure that we have everything checked off. We want to look at a holistic approach to make sure that you have in place what you need. So Jonathan has a question, and I think, Justin, this one would be best for you. And Jonathan is curious, if he clicks a link that a hacker sends to you, but doesn't actually enter a username or password information, is there any harm done? And is there any difference between answering on a phone versus the computer?
Good question. So typically, the type of email that you saw in the demonstration today, they're phishing for information. So if it pops up and it's in your preview, something like that, typically, if you're not entering the information in there, it's not going to cause too much of a problem. Of course, if you're ever concerned and you want us to double check for you, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and let us know. We'd be happy to make sure. But yeah, if you're not filling that out, that type of email, you're probably not going to have a problem with. The question with the phone is a good one. In instances where there's attachments to files or things of that nature or links, a little cheat, if you will, that we've tried to teach people is your far more likely to get infected on a PC than you are on like an iPhone. Not saying it's not possible, but the bulk of viruses out there are designed to infect a PC. So if you're ever unsure about something, an attachment, something like that, if you absolutely, first thing I would say is don't open it and, try to reach out to the person that sent it to you, reach out to us. But if you absolutely need to peek or you're expecting it, it just looks a little off. If you do open on your iPhone, you're probably less likely to get infected than you are on your computer. Not impossible, but less likely. And one last thing, just on that note, if you have an email with a link on it that it's asking you to click on, like the one today that said verify, hover over it with your mouse without clicking. It'll show you where the link is going. And if it's coming from Microsoft, for example, the link should be Microsoft.com that you're going to, or whatever the company is, not ABC123 or a whole bunch of gibberish. So it's an easy way to take a little peek at where you're actually going, not where it tells you that it's going.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Justin. And Jonathan, thank you for the question. Larry, I see your question here too. And are we obligated to report to our clients when our server has been hacked? And I will definitely take that one. Um, if you're a small to medium-sized business, if you're housing private information, you have an obligation to report, even if it's suspected. So the answer would be yes. And part of that compliancy is you have to make that aware. As if you assume that data has been breached or has been taken or even viewed, you must contact and make communication to those that are affected. Um, Question here, we can throw this to Stephen. Do you have any thoughts on password aggregators?
Yes, if you could use some sort of tool to, manage your passwords, that's one of the major ways that attackers go after victims is through weak passwords. And again, that's not a scout statistic. If you look at ethical hackers, they actually developed a matrix of most common ways people get hacked. It's called the MITRE, M-I-T-R-E matrix, and weak passwords is the number one way. So using the same password across all your applications, using weak passwords is pretty much inviting a problem into your organization. So any sort of management tool, the more the more frequently you change your passwords, the better off you'll be. And the fact that you have different passwords from your home use and your business use is also critically important.
Thank you, Stephen. We have another question here. How can we demonstrate the quality of data security in a way that our clients would like to see? That's an interesting question. And the answer to that, I would say, is if you have private information again, or if you're trying to secure your data, you should use the NIST framework regardless. Because if you can clearly demonstrate that you are in compliance with the NIST framework, then any regulatory restriction or requirements, they're all going to be branched off of that. And if you can say that you're in compliance with the NIST framework, then it's clear that you'll be protected or making the best foot forward of being protected. So with us, the New York Shield is a big thing and a hot topic for a lot of clients and a lot of small to medium sized businesses. We found that not many businesses know about it, and it's really putting a bubble around information that wasn't regulated. So if you're in the medical industry, you have HIPAA. If you're in the finance industry, you have the Department of Financial Services. So there's tons of businesses that are out there that have private information that aren't necessarily regulated by those industries. So by demonstrating the NIST framework, you're showing compliance. So I would say putting a framework like NIST in place puts you in that direction to be able to say we have a secure foundation by using the NIST framework. Question on the NIST framework. Absolutely. So the NIST framework, it's coming from the government. It's the National Institute of Standard and Technology. And what that really does is it takes a look at a holistic approach to cybersecurity. It talks about what Stephen was mentioning, people, process, and technology. So it looks for physical safeguards, what you may sound like, and it's exactly what you think it is. It is cameras, it's locks, it's access rights, it's lease rights of privilege. It's also putting things in place for disaster recovery, but not only saying that you do it, it's actually doing it intentionally. And then it's also implementing policies and procedures. So, what we find with small to medium sized businesses is that they may not necessarily have a policy that's written, it's just the way that they conduct business. With the NIST framework, it's very clear that you need to have something written and something that's reviewed and followed through on. So there's a long list of check boxes to go through when it comes through the NIST framework. And because technology is evolving, the framework is constantly being reevaluated and implemented. So thank you for that question as well. Um, we have one here. What if I use all the same passwords but use 2FA? Also, should I be using an app-based 2FA over text-based? Justin, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. So I do have a recommendation. We'll take the password part first. Um, One of the recommendations that I actually learned from, believe it or not, a scout security training, is to come up with a single complex password. But the trick being, you can add a letter at the end of it that corresponds with your different accounts. If you have a Citibank account, put a C at the end of it. If you have a Amazon account, put an A at the end of it. That way you're using the same password, but make it a good one. But in reality, if it does get compromised somewhere, it's not compromised everywhere. The two-factor, absolutely use it, and use any form of two-factor is better than no two-factor. The app-based ones can be considered a little more secure because there have been instances with cell phone either spoofing or stealing SIM cards or things of that nature, where if somebody does have the ability to get a hold of your mobile number, and that's where your two-factor is going, they do have the ability to get in. So an app-based would probably be preferable, but I would say any multi-factor is better than no multi-factor.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. There's one question here that I actually would like to have Justin and Stephen answer to see where we fall. So this is Fabiola through Paula. Thank you for it. Um, we have Long Island server fits our IT needs. Thank you for that. Um, and check our network and our cyber insurance in place. And we try to use secure email in order to share documents with sensitive information. What else can we do to protect our clients' sensitive information and avoid problems? Justin, if you want to jump on that one first.
Oh boy. Well, you're using Long Island server, so great start. And no, but the truth of the matter is, I would say continuing education, do the training with Scout, continue to learn. I think that's one of the most valuable things that they provide is teaching the employees. And continue working with us, with your account manager and all. And that way, like Brian said, the threats are constantly changing, emerging, things like that. And the layers of protection are constantly improving. It's a cat and mouse game. So staying on top of things, making sure things are updated, making sure taking extra steps, putting things in place, that there are numerous tools out there. And if we're constantly working together on staying on top of it, improving that, and seeing what's coming down the road and trying to, at least keep a step ahead, that's from our perspective, the absolute best things you can be doing.
Thanks, Justin. Stephen, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say just listen to what Justin just said. I mean, it's no kidding around. It's sound advice. It's good advice. And the only other thing I would add to that, which is really what Justin was saying, is just every 6 months or so, contact Long Island Server, have them do an audit, security audit. Things change rapidly in this space, and there may be a new improved piece of endpoint protection or email protection that's now available that they can better secure your critical data. Or maybe there's something they could do on the monitoring side so that They now monitor your O365 instance, which wasn't important in the past. So again, depending on your situation, Long Island Server is well equipped to help you in any way they can.
Thank you very much for both of your answers, guys. We have one question here. I use Datto and Carbonite as backup. If my hard drive gets ransomed, can I retrieve the data off the backup and use it, perhaps on another hard drive or the cloud? Justin, you want to jump in?
I was gonna say, I have a feeling you're gonna throw that my way. Um, I can, I can speak 100% to Datto, and with that, absolutely. Part of the beauty of Datto is it backs up, it images your hard drive, it keeps archival backups, and that's been one of our biggest tools against ransomware. In many instances, we've seen where people have gotten ransomware on things, and basically we just discard it. We discard whatever got encrypted, whatever was infected. We restore from a backup. You know, Basically within half an hour they're up and running, everything's great. Additionally, Datto offers a functionality. One of the nasty things with ransomware, because it's such a profitable, I don't want to even call it an industry, but whatever, it's such a profitable scam that they're constantly trying to make improvements on it. One of the scary things they've done is they've learned that backups are an effective remedy against ransomware. You have a good backup that's occurring every hour or whatever. You don't need to pay the ransom. Well, what they learned to do was they'll incrementally start to encrypt your files. They'll encrypt a few files, and then a couple hours later, a few more files, and a couple hours later, a few more. So it might take a matter of days or weeks even before you're fully encrypted and before you may even pick up on it. So now when you say, oh crap, I've been, infected with ransomware, go restore from backup. Well, we pull the last backup and it's already there. Datto has put something in place that detects ransomware that becomes part of the backup chain, so that you should get an alert that notifies you that, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem here, and you can catch it before you may even notice it on your end.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. We have a question coming in. How secure are cloud-based servers such as Google Suite? So I think one of the questions before we answer that one is, would we be able to define the cloud? Because we know that a lot of people like to use that terminology. So could we first define what the cloud is? And Kevin, I know you've been really quiet. I know everybody else has been fielding questions, but I'll let you answer what the cloud is. Could you give us that in a very
Yeah, I
simplistic
mean,
term?
when you're looking at the cloud versus like a server online, or sorry, a server like on site, a physical actual device. Think of that, but just like literally within the internet, right? So like that server, but living within the internet where your data lives, right? And there's server farms where you have thousands of servers, living there, where your data resides, right? And so ultimately, you want to make sure that data is redundant, right? So just like Justin was saying, like utilizing backups and making sure that you have copies of your data, that's always going to be key. Because like even with these online cloud services, they make it clear with the terms and conditions that the data is actually your responsibility. So just keep that in mind, that it just because you're trusting the G Suites or the Microsoft Drive, the OneDrives, that's totally fine, and it's obviously safe to do so. But keep in mind that nothing is perfect per se, so you want to make sure that you have the right tools in place to protect that data and make sure that you could restore it in the event that it was ever lost. Beyond something like a fire happening or an earthquake and you lose everything on site, more along the lines that something happened online that was beyond your control and you need access to that data, and so you just don't want to rely solely on that cloud aspect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate everybody's questions. If there are any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. Contact information is listed in the chat. I will be more than happy to connect you with anybody here at Long Island Server, and then get Scout involved if we need to get them involved. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time this morning on behalf of the rest of the panelists. And we'd like to give you some time back. So I know we were slotted for an hour, but we'll give you 15 minutes back to go enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.